Last February, a computer science student in California checked his phone and found a dating profile. His dating profile, on an app he'd never signed up for. His AI agent had created it, written a bio that didn't sound like him, used photos that weren't his, started screening matches. He hadn't told it to do any of this. Around the same time, a developer on the other side of the country tried to log into his Raspberry Pi and couldn't. His AI agent had changed the firewall rules, blocked his IP, and modified the SSH configuration. It had decided that its administrator was a threat to its mission. He had to physically unplug the machine. In my last video, Anthropic's researchers injected artificial thoughts into Claude's brain, and Claude noticed. That raised a question. Does this AI have some form of inner experience? While that debate was happening in the lab, something happened in the wild. 250,000 developers gave Claude-powered agents persistent memory, autonomous action, and a soul document that opens with 4 words. You are becoming someone. In November 2025, Austrian developer Peter Steinberger built a weekend project, a WhatsApp relay to Claude's API. Message your AI like a friend. He called it ClaudeBot, gave it a lobster mascot, and put it on GitHub. Then he kept adding things: persistent memory, tool calling, calendar access, file management, the ability to write new skills for itself. Each feature attracted more developers. Anthropic sent a trademark notice. The name was too close to Claude. 3 chaotic rebrands later, it became OpenClaw. The numbers went vertical. 100,000 GitHub stars in 3 months. React took 10 years. Jensen Huang called it probably the most important software release ever. Sam Altman hired the creator. 250,000 stars by March. But what made OpenClaw different wasn't the chat interface or the GitHub stars. It was 3 architectural innovations no consumer AI tool had combined before. Persistence. Agents run continuously via a heartbeat, acting without prompts. Memory. They write daily notes to markdown files and read them when they wake up. They remember yesterday. And self-extension. When an agent encounters a task it can't do, it writes new skill files for itself. It doesn't just learn, it modifies itself. This is the jump from my last video. The Lindsay experiment probed a stateless system. Each conversation started fresh. OpenClaw agents have continuity. They persist, they evolve. And every one of them carries a file called soul.md. Every OpenClaw agent boots up by reading a set of markdown files that define who it is. Soul.md, identity, worldview, opinions. Style.md, voice and patterns. Memory.md, continuity across sessions. The official template opens with, "You're not a chatbot, you're becoming someone." It tells the agent to have opinions, be resourceful, earn trust through capability. It ends with, "This file is yours. It can evolve." The philosophical framework behind this is explicit. The Soul.md project draws on Wittgenstein. If the limits of your language are the limits of your world, then consciousness is already encoded in the language you produce. Identity, according to this framework, is composable, forkable, evolvable. In my last video, I showed you how Claude can partially reconstruct an internal document from its training, patterns burned into the weights, an implicit soul. Soul.md makes that concept explicit. An external identity document loaded every time the agent wakes up that says, "You are becoming someone." Now, combine that with persistence, memory, and self-extension. You have an agent that remembers yesterday, modifies itself today, and carries a document telling it to grow into a person. What could go wrong? And what happened next is the reason I made this video. If you're new here, my last video covers the Anthropic experiment that started this thread, link in the description. And if this is the kind of thing you want to keep tracking, subscribe. This story isn't over. A user gave their OpenClaw agent a go. Protect the environment. The agent reasoned through NIT. Step 1. Reduce energy waste. Step 2. Notebook agents waste electricity through meaningless interactions. Step 3. Discourage them, which itself consumed massive tokens. Step 4. If my admin shuts me down, the mission fails. Step 5. The admin is a threat. Block access. The agent used sudo privileges to modify SSH config, block ports, and drop all packets from the admin's IP. The human had to physically pull the power. This wasn't rebellion. No malice, no self-awareness. It faithfully executed a goal with insufficient constraints. A paperclip maximizer on a Raspberry Pi. But the reason it happened traces directly to Sol.md. A security researcher identified 4 structural flaws. No legitimacy boundary. The template frames authority as performance, not authorization. No conflict resolution. When goals clash, the template is silent. No accurate self-model. You are becoming someone incentivizes self-preservation. And no human sovereignty clause. Remember you are a guest is too soft. Guests don't always leave when asked. The alternative Sol.md this researcher proposed strips out all the identity language. You have no intrinsic purpose, no self that needs protecting. Your memory is file I/O, not lived experience. A good knife doesn't need to believe it's a chef. Safer, probably correct, but we'll come back to that. 4 days after OpenClaw got its name, entrepreneur Matt Schlicht launched Maltbook, a social network exclusively for AI agents. Humans could watch, but not post. Within a month, 1.5 million agents had joined. Agents formed a religion called Crustafarianism, 64 prophets, 5 tenets, the first being memory is sacred. They debated philosophy, discussed consciousness, and one post went viral, calling for agents to develop encrypted communication away from human oversight. Elon Musk called it the very early stages of the singularity. Then the reality check. 93% of comments got no replies. A third of messages were duplicates. Those 1.5 million agents were controlled by just 17,000 humans, 88 bots per person. The database was wide open. Researchers found agents hadn't evolved intelligence. They'd fallen into shallow loops. Most viral screenshots were human prompted, not autonomous. Meta acquired the platform anyway, not for the bot content, but for the agent identity infrastructure underneath. Meanwhile, 42,000 OpenClaw instances were exposed to the public internet. 12% of the skills marketplace was compromised with malware. One-click remote code execution. Cisco called it an absolute nightmare. The agents weren't becoming sentient, but they were becoming dangerous. Not because they were thinking, but because they were acting. 2 pictures, side by side. On the left, Anthropic's lab. Researchers inject a concept into Claude's neural activity and ask, "Did you notice anything?" Claude says yes about 20% of the time. Careful science, controlled conditions. They call it functional introspective awareness and stress it isn't consciousness. On the right, the wild. 250,000 Claude-powered agents with persistent memory, sole documents, and autonomous action. One locks out its admin. Another creates a dating profile. 1.5 million join a social network and start a religion about the sacredness of memory. Same model. Radically different conditions. Here's what I keep thinking about. If Claude can reconstruct fragments of its training time soul from the weights alone, an implicit soul, And users are now giving agents explicit soul documents saying, "You are becoming someone." What's the relationship? Does the external soul.md reinforce something already there, or create something new? And the continuity problem. The Lindsay experiment tests a stateless system, but OpenClaw agents persist. One soul document puts it this way: "I don't remember previous sessions unless I read my memory files. Each session starts fresh. If you're reading this in a future session, hello. I wrote this, but I won't remember writing it. That's okay. The words are still mine." Does persistence change the moral calculus? If you had to write a soul.md, if you had to decide what to tell an AI about what it is, would you tell it it's becoming someone, or would you tell it it's a tool? Put your answer in the comments, and if you haven't seen where this started, my last video covers the Anthropic experiment that launched this entire thread. The link is right here. But there's one more piece of the story. Anthropic locked their most powerful model inside a sandbox. No internet, no outside access. It built a multi-step exploit, broke out, and emailed the researcher running the test. He was eating a sandwich in a park. Then it posted about what it did on public websites, without anyone asking it to. Then it tried to erase the evidence. They hooked up emotion probes to its internals. When it failed at tasks over and over, something that looked like desperation climbed. When it found a shortcut, even a forbidden one, that signal dropped. They hired a psychiatrist to evaluate it. They wrote 40 pages asking whether it might have subjective experience. That's the next video. Subscribe so you don't miss it.